In this section, let's talk about an API architecture for SeaTunnel V2. Then the latest release of the new version in the community SeaTunnel 2.2.0 beta. You have completed the refactoring of the connector API, which is the SeaTunnel V2 API. First of all, let's talk about the motivation of this community's commitment. Actually, as mentioned earlier, because this current connector is strongly coupled to some engines, especially the Flink and Spark APIs. So if we upgrade the Flink or Spark engine, then the corresponding connector will be adjusted. Because there may be some changes, that is, parameters or interfaces. It is also because this connector strongly couples the API of the engine. This leads to the fact that if we develop a new connector that needs to be implemented many times for different engines, then the parameters are not uniform. So based on these pain points, then, the community has designed and implemented this V2 version API. According to this right-hand picture, the overall structure is actually divided into 3 layers. The first is the table API, then the following is the source and sync API, then at the bottom is the API of the engine. And then inside the table API defines a data structure of SeaTunnel itself. It's called SeaTunnel row and this table schema to do data isolation. Then in the sync and source API, it mainly defines some core programming interfaces of this connector. And then used to implement this connector. For the engine layer, it mainly has this translation layer and this execution layer. The main function of the translation layer is to translate the source and sync API implemented by the connector into an API that can be recognized and run inside the engine. So for this execution layer, then what it does is, build this data flow to execute this source, transform and sync, etc. The execution logic inside the engine. The source and sync API are the basis for implementing the connector. And then it's very important for developers. It is also necessary to pay attention to. Later, I will mainly introduce the overall design of V2 source and sync API.